Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is Chris and welcome to the channel. If you happen to be new, we are grateful you are here and we are so grateful for all of you that have decided to come back to watch another video. In our last video, we showed you all about our baby vampire crabs and their grow out container. You even got to meet this little guy that we call Lefty. And Lefty, along with all of his brothers and sisters, have actually outgrown their grow out tub and it's time for something bigger. So we went out and picked us up an Exoterra mini tall terrarium that we gave you a sneak peek of in the last video. And today's video is going to be all about how to build one of these out and what we've done with it. So now that we have this pre-made background out of here, let's go ahead and get these doors off to make some room for us to get in here and create an absolute epic setup. I plan on having a terrestrial and aquatic area in this setup with a waterfall and a natural background. So let's get to it. I'm using a sheet of plexiglass or acrylic sheet, and I have cut a section off to fit in the base of this terrarium. I want to be able to separate the base into two equal parts. The left side will be a terrestrial area, while the right side will stay wet with a waterfall. We want to try to keep this as naturalistic as possible, and these particular crabs come from Java, Indonesia, in a forest floor area close to water sources with a very wet and damp environment. Now that I have this piece of acrylic sheet cut down to size, I'm laying down some painter's tape to leave a nice clean bead of silicone for this to fit right into. I actually learned this method from Serpa Design, and honestly, where I'm putting this piece of plexiglass, it really doesn't matter how clean the bead is, as you'll never be able to see it. But I've never used this method before and wanted to try it out, and it worked pretty good. Now that I have the background concept, I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out how I'm going to hide all of the waterfall components, which is going to be the power supply as well as the hose that feeds the waterfall. I'm installing this piece of PVC pipe in the back corner, and this will allow us to run the power cable through it. So if we ever need to service this pump, it can easily be removed and is not stuck within the background permanently. Now it's time to foam everything in. You want to make sure you wear gloves, because if you get this on your hands, it is not coming off. You want to use a liberal amount. Make sure you hit every spot that touches the glass. You can use as much as you need because it'll carve off nicely. Alright guys, well we have the first initial phase of this done, and essentially what we've done is foamed in this cork as well as some rocks over here to give some structure. You'll see the hose that comes out of the side of this piece of cork right here. This is actually going to be a waterfall, and as we talked about earlier, we have this divider in the middle which gives this side a water feature and this side a terrestrial feature, kind of making it like a little paludarium. Because these baby vampire crabs are actually terrestrial and don't spend a lot of time in the water, they are going to need water as well as land, and that's kind of why we did what we did. Now it's just a matter of letting this thing cure, set up, and we'll come back and start carving this wood and getting this thing finished up. By far, the most fun part about creating one of these terrarium backgrounds is carving the foam. This is where you get super creative, and the more creative you are and the more creative you get, the more naturalistic you can make this background look. So we're going to be using a straight bladed razor as well as a small kitchen knife to carve away all of this excess foam. Now we want to come back and cover up the black foam with a layer of silicone. This silicone will allow us to bond material to this background, giving it a naturalistic look and hiding all the imperfections of this waterfall foam. Now that we have completely covered all of the exposed foam with silicone, we're going to come back and we're going to dust that silicone with some coconut core fiber, as well as some other elements like some small pea gravel, some pieces of cypress mulch, and things of that nature, giving it a very naturalistic look. Once you've put this coconut fiber down, you want to press it down into the silicone really well to make sure it adheres to the background completely. As the right side of this is going to be a waterfall, I did not cover it with silicone or the coconut core. What we're going to do is carve out an actual waterfall, building it up with rock, all the way back up towards the top, so the water has a nice even flow down into the aquatic section. With the waterfall complete, we're going to come back and do the same process for all of the exposed foam. We're going to cover it with a nice thin layer of silicone, and then we will come back and cover up the silicone with coconut core fiber, some small pea gravel, some other elements to give it a naturalistic look. We will also fill in some larger spaces with some additional rock, that way we can direct the flow of water. And now it's time to add final larger elements, as well as cover up any further imperfections within this background. We can do this very simply by adding additional silicone to any bare spots and simply covering that with dirt, rock, coconut core fiber, or anything else that's naturalistic. And now that it's dry, let's take a look. And as you can see, we have a waterfall on the right side, a nice tree trunk looking area on the left. We've got all these branches coming out of it. And all that's left to do now is go ahead and clean the background completely off, and we need to go ahead and test our waterfall system. The particular pump I'm using does not allow me to control flow, so I'm going to have to control it using elements within this waterfall. So I need to trim down this piece of hose and use some rock to help block some of the water flow. I want this to be a nice solid trickle down the front of this waterfall, and we're going to accomplish that using some rock. I think that the flow of the waterfall across the rocks looks really good, so we need to go ahead and drain this thing back out and start building out the terrestrial area. To create the terrestrial area, we're going to need to first create a false bottom or a drainage layer. We will accomplish this with about a 1/2 inch thick layer of small pea gravel. This will hold a nice amount of water below the substrate layer. And we'll smooth this out with a set of terrarium tools that we got from freshwaterscrub.com. Use the code PLANTS for 10% off your entire order through the end of April 2022. Now that we have about a 1/2 inch of pea gravel laid across the bottom of this terrestrial area, we're going to lay down a piece of black garden felt or weed barrier. This will keep the drainage rock and the dirt substrate separated from one another, keeping the water in this drainage layer completely clean. And now to mix up a terrarium mix. There are many different recipes online, but this is one that I've come up with that works pretty well. I always start with a base of some aquarium water because it's very nutrient dense. I use an organic seed starting mix, which is based on coconut core as well as some sphagnum moss. I add a little bit additional coconut core, a little sand, and then a little bit of cypress mulch. We really want to get this substrate pushed all the way down over the top of this weed barrier. We want to make sure that the weed barrier does not allow any of the dirt to fall through down into the drainage rock layer. And now it's time to get out and pick up some plants. As I was deciding how I was going to plant this, I noticed that there was a large open space between the aquatic and terrestrial areas that was back behind the background. I've added a small piece of egg crate and covered that with a piece of the weed barrier in order to protect the aquatic area from the substrate. This will hold the substrate back over onto the terrestrial area, allowing us to add a nice little plant right directly into the background. We went ahead and added a multitude of plants to both the bottom area in the terrestrial side as well as up into the canopy of this enclosure. We've added different kinds of ferns such as a rabbit's foot fern as well as a Boston fern. We've added some different types of creeping plants down here in the terrestrial area to give almost a grass effect. We also added a white vein plant as well. And now we're going to add some final elements, such as this cypress mulch around these plants. The whole concept here is to try to find elements that are going to hold lots of moisture. Hence the reason we go with mulch and coconut coir, sphagnum moss, things of that nature. You want to be able to keep humidity high within the enclosure, especially for these little vampire crabs. As they are terrestrial dwellers, they do live in the forest floor of Java, Indonesia, where it has a very high humidity level. And now to add some live moss elements to the cracks and crevices throughout the waterfall, between the tree trunks, and everywhere else we can find some place to hold some moss. We will also add some Christmas moss, and this Christmas moss we sell on our website freshwaterscrub.com. And if you'd like to pick some up, use the code PLANTS for 10% off your order until the last day of April 2022. The next element that we will be adding is live oak leaf litter, and this makes for a great hide for both crabs, as well as the fact that we will be making this enclosure bioactive, and we will need lots of hiding places for all of our isopods. This is a magnolia seed pod. It's another great botanical to add to the forest floor of any type of enclosure. It is also great at holding moisture, as well as provides cover for any of your animals or creatures that you put in here. And now to make this bioactive. What we're adding to the bottom of the enclosure here is some dirt directly from a springtail breeding setup, and this holds many springtails that will continue to populate this enclosure, keeping all of the mold and mildew under control within this enclosure. We're also going to go ahead and add some isopods, and these isopods will also continue to populate this enclosure. They will keep all of the organic waste under control. All right, guys, well, this thing is done. I mean, look at this thing. It looks fantastic. And I really hope that the little crabs absolutely thrive in this enclosure. Everything is looking so good. The plant growth is good. All of the waterfall looks good. We added some frog bit down here in this little aquatic area. And there is literally not going to be anything in here other than these plants. This water is actually tank water, so it's pre-cycled, pre-filtered, everything is good. There is some filtration media in the back to keep some beneficial bacteria blooming in here. We have a bunch of our Christmas moss up in here in these cracks and crevices that's growing in really nice. We have this little fern here that's growing. One of our little tiny crab has made its way right up inside of here and is hanging out. These things are great climbers. One of them went up into this area here, so everything is looking good. I only added 4 to this just simply because it is not an overly large terrarium. I didn't want to overstock it. We will have to build something for the rest of them, but for right now we have 4 babies in here and we're going to watch to see how they grow in here. With that, before we get out of here, let's take a look at a couple other things. Guys, do you see that? That is a baby frog. They just jumped out of here. Let's see if we can find any more of them. There's one right there, guys. Do you see that? Look at that. That is amazing, guys. There is something over here that we cannot show you that's coming in a video very soon, so you're gonna have to stay tuned for that. But I wanted to at least come out here and see if we could see any baby frogs, and we in fact did see baby frogs, which is fantastic. Our goldfish are all looking good. The water is nice and warm. Everything looks great. And look at the frog bit, all growing in, coming back to life. I've added no frog bit to this. This is all regenerated from last year. One of our little froglets there, that is a full-fledged frog at this point. Look at that, guys. All right, guys, well, with that, hopefully you went on to enjoy this video, and hopefully you're enjoying the content. If you have not followed us on Facebook or Instagram, make sure you do that. Links to both are down in the description of every video, as well as make sure you visit freshwaterscrub.com. Pick up all of your aquarium plants, sponge filters, terrarium tools, anything else that you may need, including Christopher Scott merch, and use the code PLANTS for 10% off your order until the last day of April 2022. I have to say I'm super grateful for each and every one of you for coming and watching my videos. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and hey, we will see you next time.